This week on BuzzFeed Unsolved, we discussed the incendiary and baffling death of Mary Reeser, who media later labeled as the Cinder Woman.
Incendiary?
Yeah, incendiary.
You can go around with a $5 word like that.
That's not a $5 word.
Oh, yeah.
Stick around for the last theory because it's something we've never discussed before on this show. So, let's get into it.
Spoiler alert, it's probably aliens.
On July 2nd, 1951, in St. Petersburg, Florida, Mary Hardy Reeser was visited by her son in the evening at her apartment. Mary told her son that she had taken 2 Seconal tablets, a drug commonly used to calm patients before surgery, and was possibly planning on taking 2 more before bed.
Bad idea. Did she have a prescription for them?
No, she did not. However, her son was actually a doctor.
I'm considering him a suspect.
Why
her
would she
son's
kill?
feeding her sedatives.
He didn't feed her
Yeah,
sedatives.
he's like, go on, mother.
Jesus
Eat these
Christ.
pills.
You just made this go so much more dark than it needed to
Well,
be.
I just don't trust this boy. Yeah, have some pills, smoke this cigarette. Good night.
He visited her. She told him these things. If it was truly alarming, he probably would have said, hey, maybe don't do that.
Okay.
Or he's just a terrible doctor. Later that night, Mary would fall asleep sitting in her upholstered chair for the last time, as Mary would become the victim of an apparent house fire. The next morning, Mary's landlady would report smelling smoke at 5 a.m., but it wasn't until 8 a.m. when the landlady was on her way to deliver a telegram to Mary that she noticed the smell of smoke again. She discovered soot in the hallway that led to Mary Reeser's apartment. When she went to touch the door handle, it was too hot for her to grab, so the landlady enlisted the help of nearby house painters who made their way into the apartment.
This is a very irresponsible landlady. If your tenants' apartments smell like smoke,
I mean, okay,
maybe check in on them.
This is gonna get a little morbid, but who's to say that a burning body doesn't smell like barbecue?
Yeah, it probably does.
So
hey, meat's meat.
Maybe they thought, oh man, someone's making bacon. Maybe I'll do the same. I'm just saying, I don't think it's weird that she didn't immediately jump into action at 5 a.m.
Well, okay.
What they discovered would simultaneously horrify and confound the Tampa Bay area. Inside the apartment, they found the cremated remains of Mary Reeser. Mary's skull had reportedly shrunk to the size of a cup.
That doesn't make any sense.
How does that? No, of course it doesn't make sense. It's weird.
Has any skull shrunk at any other point in history?
Oh man, see, now you're asking the right questions. Now you're acting like a detective and not like a jackass.
Well, at least one of us is doing it.
Parts of Reeser's spine also remained, but perhaps the most gruesome was Reeser's left foot, still in its black satin slipper, the skin unburned. The rest of Mary's remains had been completely cremated.
Her legs were the size of little tiny teaspoons.
You don't think it's weird that all of her was gone except for a skull, parts of the spine, and a fucking foot that is still completely intact like nothing happened?
Maybe she was like, I always sit up with one of my feet up on the...
Oh, so you're saying that she was like sleeping back in like a comfy state, like a talk show kind of state?
Like a talk show, like George Clooney on The Tonight Show. I bet if George Clooney was on The Tonight Show and you set him on fire, one of his feet would burn, and the other one would probably still be planted there on the floor in a very nice shoe. Clooney's flammable.
Clooney is probably flammable, you're probably right. However, what makes this case bizarre is the condition of Mary's surroundings. According to cremation experts, for Mary's body to be cremated, the body would have to burn at 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit for 3 to 4 hours. Yet somehow, other than the chair that Mary sat in, the surrounding area, as well as the apartment in general, seemed relatively unaffected by a fire that was at least 3,000 degrees. In the corner where the fire occurred, the nearby walls were not damaged, showing no signs of scorching or cracked paint. The upper walls and ceiling were blackened from soot and smoke, but the lower half of the apartment was not. Light switches were melted, but outlets below were intact and functioning. Candles on a nearby windowsill had melted, but their wicks stood upright. A stack of newspapers in close proximity were undamaged. Neighbors to Mary's apartment were also somehow unaware of this fire. Firemen who came on the scene found the heat so intense that they, quote, couldn't stand it, end quote, but also found no signs of smoldering. So a fire that was too hot for firemen did not damage her apartment somehow.
Too much fire here. What do I look like, a fireman?
Detective Chief Cass Burgess described the case as perplexing. Dr. Wilton M. Krogman, professor of physical anthropology at the University of Pennsylvania, was, quote, amazed and baffled, as he could not, quote, conceive of such a complete cremation without more burning of the apartment itself. Dr. Krogman also stated that in his 30-plus fire investigations, he had never seen a skull shrink like Mary's had. The skulls normally become swollen or explode. Investigators sent samples of the chair, rug, debris, and smoke to an FBI laboratory for chemical analysis. However, the investigation did not find traces of combustibles. What they did find was melted fat in the rug.
Soot in a foot. That's all they got, huh? Soot foot in a cup skull.
That's a bizarro version of a Dr. Seuss book right there.
All this leads us to perhaps the most mysterious detail of the case, the cause of the fire. A local mattress company pointed out the regular chair stuffing would not cause such a fire. The material would merely smolder for a prolonged period. Lightning or electrical failure was also ruled out on the scene. However, the night before, Mary was reportedly seen smoking a cigarette in that chair. With that in mind, the FBI and police believe that the fire most likely started because Mary fell asleep while smoking a cigarette, which possibly led to her lighting her nightgown on fire. This would enact something known as the WICK effect, where clothes act as a wick, setting fire to the body. The FBI felt that, quote, once the body became ignited, almost complete destruction occurred from its own fatty tissues, end quote. At the time, Mary weighed about 170 pounds.
Well, if there's no cigarette found, that's fine, because
it would be incinerated.
Yeah, it would be soot.
But, I mean, you would think they would fall on the floor, maybe. The foot didn't catch on fire.
The foot did not catch on fire. One of them, anyway. That other one, whew,
Yeah, it does so.
up like Christmas.
At a glance, that scenario seems plausible, but is certainly not definitive. Here are some alternate theories as to how the fire started. The first theory is ridiculous.
I'm just gonna say that right out. It's ridiculous.
I never heard you just
I know,
flat out.
for me to say it's ridiculous.
This is a first.
Detective Burgess received a letter addressed to the chief of detectives that said, quote, a ball of fire came through the open window and hit her. I seen it happen, end quote.
I don't trust anyone who says, I seen it happen. That sounds like a country bumpkin if I've ever heard one. I seen it.
I seen it happen
I
while I was
seen
playing
it
with
with my own
banjo.
2 eyes.
There's something we can agree on. I don't think this is a credible source.
The second theory is that the fire was started purposefully. Some suggest that the fire could have been caused by thermite bombs, kerosene, magnesium and phosphorus, and napalm. But according to the coroner of the case, all of those would leave a distinct odor, none of which were detected at the scene. The third and final theory is that Mary was a victim of spontaneous human combustion. Let's dive into the history of spontaneous human combustion. Allegedly, there have been roughly 200 recorded cases of spontaneous combustion.
200?
Roughly 200.
Okay, all right. So it's just
Quite
maybe
a
a thing
few.
then, okay.
I mean, these are alleged cases or reported cases.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, that's a lot of cases.
Well, okay, keep going.
Okay.
The earliest case of spontaneous human combustion dates back to 1470 in Milan, Italy, when Polonius Forstius died by bursting into flames after a night of drinking. His gruesome death was recorded in 1641 by Thomas Bartholin, a Danish mathematician and doctor.
Can you imagine just being out, having a good night with your pals drinking? And you know, toward the end of the night when you're like, yeah, what a fun night this has been. Can you imagine just exploding? Just catching on fire? All your pals would be like, huh?
Immediate buzzkill. I
Yeah.
could say that.
Not a good night
No, I think we could both agree on
for
that.
him or his friends.
In 1745, the Countess Cornelia Bandi of Cesena, Italy, was found burnt to a pile of ashes with only her legs intact. Skipping forward to modern times, in 1982, the family of Jean Saffin claimed they saw her burst into flames in her London home. In 2010, a coroner claimed spontaneous human combustion to be the cause of death of 76-year-old Irishman Michael Faherty, who was found in his home with none of his surroundings badly tarnished. And of course, Mary Reeser, who many believe is a victim of spontaneous human combustion.
Is it very European to burst into flames?
I don't think incendiary behavior is exclusive to Europe because she happened in Florida.
I know, I'm just saying Europe.
Put that pen down. You just look like a jackass.
A lot of people explode in Europe.
Stop it. Put it down.
Something you want to look into. This runs deep.
Now let's get into the science of spontaneous human combustion. The human combustion process involves internal fluids turning into gas, and the melted fat of the body further burning organs and bones. If you'll recall, fat was found in the rug at the scene of Mary Reeser's death. Some consider the possibility of spontaneous human combustion to be questionable, since the body is made up to 70% of water, though there are components of the body that are flammable, such as body fat and methane gas. Unproven theories as to why the body would ignite so easily include static electricity, bacteria, stress, obesity, and alcohol consumption. Some also believe that human cells may reach a heightened state of vulnerability to ignite. In 2012, in an issue of New Scientist magazine, biologist Brian J. Ford theorizes that a large concentration of acetate in the body may contribute to spontaneous combustion. Acetone buildup could result from alcohol intake, variations in diet, and diabetes. Cases of spontaneous combustion typically contain these 3 characteristics. Surroundings of the site of the fire are not drastically damaged. There is no visible source of the fire. And finally, parts of the body are left intact and adjacent to the ashes. All of these were present in Mary Reeser's case.
When I think spontaneous combustion, I think like, bam, like a pop balloon, just little shards of person just exploding.
No, I think what you should be thinking is someone just immediately lighting on fire like that asshole in Fantastic Four.
Now, what do you have against him?
Oh, I hate that movie. The movie sucks.
That's not a good movie. Spontaneous doesn't mean instantaneous.
When does something spontaneously happen slowly?
A spontaneous tornado came a twirling over the mountain.
This thought you're having right now is not very spontaneous.
No, it's certainly not.
Another perplexing detail is why Mary, along with other suspected victims of spontaneous human combustion, do not try and escape their death or in any way indicate that they are on freaking fire. The lack of evidence of fighting for one's life is potentially damning in regards to the cigarette theory.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if my clothes are on fire, I'll do a little dance to try and get them out, stop, drop, and roll, what have you.
I think the only thing I could think of is by the time they're on fire, they're dead already because they combusted. That would perhaps explain why no one's running around the room.
Yeah, maybe she just passed out or died or something.
If this was the only isolated case, that maybe. But there's every one of these, the surroundings aren't damaged and they're just contained to the little small area. I don't think she could have sat still while she was cremated. I think being on fire would wake anybody up.
Dr. Krogman is quoted as saying about the case, quote, "They say truth is stranger than fiction, and this case apparently proves it. I've never heard of anything like it," end quote.
Who's this, Dr. Rod Serling? Sounds like he's hosting an episode of The Twilight Zone.
I mean, it was quite profound, and I found it poetic.
I've never had a doctor speak to me like that. I
Well,
would
what
love
did you
it
want to?
if I showed up and a doctor just started unraveling strange little tales.
They say truth is stranger than fiction. So
Cool, just give me a physical,
You're gonna
doc.
give me some ibuprofen, or?
There's no definitive answer to what happened to Mary Reeser. Did she simply set herself on fire in an unfortunate accident involving a cigarette? Was she a victim of the controversial spontaneous human combustion? Or perhaps the answer lies within something we haven't discovered yet. For now, the unfortunate case of Mary Reeser remains unsolved.
Some believe there's so many cases of this happening in such contained, confines of the blast radius. The answer could lie with extraterrestrial origin.
What if aliens just get drunk and fly around the universe and
are just
shrink
assholes.
people's skulls and turn them into little piles
I mean,
of
yeah,
ash?
you could see how aliens would be involved in kind of like shenanigans and like being hooligans like that.
Bodies are weird. I made a little flip book of that's her exploding. Ah, that's a fireball.
All right. Well, I'll leave you here.
Okay.
You're ridiculous.